Well, good morning and welcome to Beacon Church. We're so glad that you're here worshiping with us, and happy Easter. We're so excited to have our first Easter services in person as well as online today. We want to take a moment to celebrate with you the success of our community Easter egg hunt from last weekend. We had over 1,000 people here join us for the event, and over 700 kids hunted for eggs that morning. It was an incredible morning to be together in the community. And thankfully, the heavy rain held off until the end of the event. We're so encouraged and excited from this time together. We couldn't have done it without all of your donations, prayers, support, and time you offered to help us. Let's check out this video with some highlights of the morning. And let's join Calvin now as he shares the message of the risen Lord today. Happy Easter to you and your family from all of us here at Beacon Church.
Well, welcome and happy Easter. If you're a guest with us today, my name is Calvin. I'm one of the pastors here today. And whether this is your first time here or for many, Easter may be the first time you're back at church for years, I just want you to know we're glad you're here to worship with us today. We've been in a series called Counterculture, and we've been realizing that a lot of our life is spent being inundated by people giving us advice and influencers, by experts. Anybody know an expert who's kind of telling us this is what is right, this is what is wrong, this is what you should be doing, how you should be living, and we've looked at that and said, with the state of our world, surely there's got to be a better way. And so through this, we've been studying the book of 1 Corinthians and looking at God's wisdom in how we should be living in the everyday of our life. Wouldn't it be nice if every day you had someone who could just look at you and say, this is what you should do today. This is what is right, and this is what is wrong, and stay away from these things. Maybe you had that with your parents when you were growing up. But for most of us, we realize that we face a lot of issues every day. And so we've been studying through the book of 1 Corinthians, but today's Easter, and when you think about Easter, what do you think about? Do you think about the fact that your mom bribed you to come to church once a year, and you're here today? Maybe for some. Do you think about Easter eggs or bunnies or chocolate? I often think about chocolate. It doesn't have to be Easter. It's just a daily thought for me. But what do you think about when you think about Easter? The crazy thing is, for a couple thousand years, billions of people have celebrated Easter. This very day, they've celebrated the fact that Jesus rose from the dead, the resurrection happened, he was no longer in the tomb, and we get to celebrate that once a year on Easter. It's interesting that it started with 12 followers, and now supposedly there is 2.3 billion people who claim to be Christians in our world today. Just think about that number. In America, we can get kind of caught off guard, right? And think, there's not very many Christians. That's 1 in 3. 2.3 billion people. I stand in awe sometimes thinking about that, and nothing really seems countercultural like a resurrection. Like, just think about that for a moment. Dead things don't come back to life, right? Like dead people, once they're dead, I mean, you can resuscitate, I get that, but not 3 days later. That's a resurrection. And sometimes in church or as Christians, we throw the word around like it's everyday retelling of your daily story, right? Like, imagine if you came back from school and your mom was like, "Hey, how was school today?" "Oh, it was great. I had math class, and then I got in trouble. I had to go to the office. But you remember John? Remember 3 days ago I told you he died in science class? Well, I was in the food hall today, and John came back to life, and I saw him. And then I went to gym. We played dodgeball. It was just a pretty good day." Well, we don't say things like that, right? That's crazy. When we think about the resurrection, it's not a natural occurrence. It's supernatural. And so today I really want us to see that it is crazy, and that's what makes it so important. That's what makes it supernaturally amazing. That Jesus, he was dead, he died on the cross, and 3 days later he rose from the dead and the grave was empty. That's what we celebrate here every year at Easter. And the question maybe you're sitting here wondering is, okay, like that sounds all well and good, that's a good story, but did it really happen? Is it true? We hear stories all the time, right, in the news and with social media and the internet. Quite often, what do they say? Don't believe everything you read on the internet. Well, do we believe that Jesus really rose from the dead? Is it true? Is that a story that we can follow? And I found this quote from a Boston author, Charles Colson, and he says this about Easter. He says, "I know the resurrection is a fact, and Watergate proved it to me." That's kind of a weird start, right? How? Because 12 men testified that they had seen Jesus raised from the dead. Then they proclaimed that truth for 40 years, never once denying it. Everyone was beaten, tortured, stoned, and put in prison. They would not have endured that if it weren't true. Watergate embroiled 12 of the most powerful men in the world, and they couldn't keep alive for 3 weeks. You're telling me 12 apostles could keep alive for 40 years? Absolutely impossible. Man, is it true? Did Jesus really rise from the dead? It's a great question. It's not a new question, though. It's not even a new question for Christians. In 1 Corinthians, Paul, he's addressing these new Christians, these followers of Jesus in the Corinthian church. And he says this in verse 3. "For what I received, I passed on to you as first importance. That Christ died for our sins according to the Scriptures, that he was buried, that he was raised on the 3rd day according to the Scriptures, and that he appeared to Cephas," Peter, "and then to the 12. After that he appeared to more than 500 of the brothers and sisters at the same time, most of whom are still living, though some have fallen asleep." These people were still asking, because it is unbelievable that someone would rise from the dead. Don't downplay that. Like, maybe you've heard it so many times in church, so many times, and you just blindly believe it. Imagine being the first ones to hear about it. And these Christians are asking Paul, like, "Paul, I know that you say this, but did it really happen?" And he's saying this story is true, and it's not just because you can feel it in your gut. Sometimes we say things like that, right? Like, "Oh, I know he's a good guy. I can just feel it in my gut." What does that mean? It's not that we can believe it just because our grandma is a good, devout Christian, and if she says something, it's got to be true. Paul's saying to these people, he was like, there's eyewitnesses. People that you can go and ask about it. If you got questions, go ask them, because honestly, they're still wondering, is what I saw real? Jesus rose from the dead. And it's tough to think, do we really believe that? I hope today that you can see this as a true story. And I hope that out of that we leave knowing that there's some amazing implications because of that truth. The fact that Jesus rose from the dead revolutionizes our world. It's the most important thing to ever have happened in our world is just that. And yes, it could only have happened because of supernatural power. If you were to come to me today and say, hey, I know this guy, he was dead and then he came back to life, he rose himself from the dead, I won't believe it. Because Jesus is the only one. And so today we're going to be looking at the story of Jesus as found in John chapter 20. It's one of the Gospels, Matthew, Mark, Luke, and John. And we've been in the story, maybe you know the Easter story. Jesus died and then he was in the tomb and it was quiet. And then on the third day, we're going to see what happens next. Verse 1, early on the first day of the week, while it was still dark, Mary Magdalene went to the tomb and saw that the stone had been removed from the entrance. So she came running to Simon Peter and the other disciple, the one Jesus loved, and said, they have taken our Lord out of the tomb, and we don't know where they've put him. Now, I think this is so interesting to note right here, that Mary, one of his most devout followers, what was her first response when she found an empty tomb? Was it, he is risen, what he told me would happen came true? No. She doubted. Even the person that's experiencing it in that moment doubts. She was like, okay, he was clearly buried in this tomb, and I show up, and he's not there. And so she goes to the disciples, and that's the first thing that she tells them. And we see later in the Bible that even after Jesus shows himself to his followers, they still doubt. They document their own doubt in the Gospels. Matthew 28, verse 16 says, then the 11 disciples went to Galilee, to the mountain where Jesus had told them to go. When they saw him, they worshipped him. But this is such a key verse right here. It says, but some doubted. You ever feel guilty when you doubt things about Jesus? Sometimes it's like, okay, so if Jesus is real, I believe that, but that doesn't quite make sense to me. Oh, I can't talk about that. I can't doubt. The Bible's filled with people that doubted the truth about Jesus. Even followers that couldn't believe their eyes what they saw. Doubt is real. That's the first thing I just want you to hear today. Doubt is real. And so if you're here today and maybe you've got some doubts you're wrestling with, I want to let you in on a secret. Even as a Christian, even as a pastor, there's days where I sit there and I'm like, did this really happen? Is Jesus really the Son of God? Did he really rise from the dead? And I wonder and I process it through my brain and through my heart and I come to the terminology that yes, he did. So if you're still doubting, stay with us. And let's just keep on seeing what happens. I think sometimes we assume that faith is the absence of doubt. But that's not true. Maybe you've thought that way before, that if you have doubt, you truly don't have faith. I think that that's wrong. In fact, I think that faith is the means to overcoming and working through our doubt. There's a correlation between faith and doubt, and I think that faith isn't about immediate certainty. Because if we had complete certainty in life, imagine that if you knew right and wrong, you knew certainty in every element, you wouldn't need faith, right? You wouldn't need to wrestle through those things in life. You wouldn't need to wrestle through the prayers that you have for God. You wouldn't even need to come to God, right? If you were certain you were right, who needs God? In fact, you really become God, don't you? So when it comes to faith, doubt has really a part to play. Doubt is real. Having faith is a choice to hold on to truth while we wrestle through doubts and insecurities. Many people, it gets to the point where they wonder, can I become a Christian if I still doubt the truth? Did Jesus really rise from the dead? This is where Mary was devastated in her grief. But what I love is what we'll see in a moment, that Jesus met Mary in her grief despite her doubt, despite her unbelief. He came and he met her. In verse 15 it says, he asked her, woman, why are you crying? Who is it you are looking for? Thinking he was the gardener, she said, sir, if you carried him away, tell me where you have put him and I will get him. And you see that she's still in this idea where she's still doubting that this could be Jesus. She'd followed this guy for like a long time, and she's now seeing him in front of her. And I don't know if she just had like tears streaming down her face and snot covering up so that she couldn't recognize Jesus. Or maybe Jesus had been in the tomb and he looked different after, like post-tomb and post-rising from the dead. I don't know, but she didn't recognize him. And surely she, of everybody, would be able to recognize the person that she'd lived with, that she'd followed, that she knew so intimately and so well. And then in verse 16, Jesus said to her, Mary. She turned toward him and cried out in Aramaic, "Rabbi," which means teacher. Jesus had to reveal himself to her. Even in her doubt, he showed up. And maybe you're sitting here today thinking, all right, that's all well and good. Jesus, yeah, he revealed himself to Mary, but I'm a nobody. Why would Jesus reveal himself to me? Like, I don't get it. Well, listen for a moment who Mary really was. This is really interesting to me. Jesus decided to use Mary, who obviously was a woman. And culturally today, we think of male and female with equality. But back then, women were of a lower status than men. Women were looked upon, and unless they had a man with them, you didn't believe them. Yes, I know that's kind of crazy, and I feel like someone's going to throw something at me. I'm not saying that that's true today, but that was true back then. And so Jesus reveals himself to Mary, who's a woman of lower status because of it. And not only that, but she was kind of a little bit of a crazy Mary. He'd previously cast out 7 demons from her. Now, we don't talk about demons and casting out demons and that very often in our day and age, but Mary, man, do you really think she was the best choice to be the first eyewitness to Jesus rising from the dead? Like, if you wanted people to believe it, wouldn't you go to like a king, or wouldn't you like go to like the disciple, some like authority figure and say, I'm back again. I'm not going to go into the song. That's what you would think, right? Jesus would come back and he would be all like this big loud noise and this bright lights and all of this kind of stuff, but that's not who Jesus was. He came back and he revealed himself to Mary. Now, this is deliberate. Man, it is so deliberate. And he came back to her in her crying, lowly state as she was devastated. Can you imagine what she must have been thinking? The disciples weren't even there. The disciples were in this room locked away because they were fearing for their life because their leader had just been killed. Like, they were in fear mode. But Mary, she was devastated. She was so devastated, she just wanted to go be near Jesus. I don't know if you've ever lost a loved one, but it's a special moment when you go to visit their graveside, right? That's kind of what Mary was doing. She was going and she was sitting at his graveside. It doesn't say what she was thinking, what she was saying or doing, except for she was crying. And in this, he looked at her and said, Mary. Jesus came back and revealed himself to her. And maybe, again, you're thinking, well, I'm nobody. Like, where do I kind of play in this story? Like, this is a historic event that happened. Like, what does that mean for me? Well, I want you to hear today that Jesus is looking at you and saying your name too. He's calling it today. And it doesn't matter who you are, what you've done, or what's been done to you. He's saying your name. One of the problems when it comes to becoming a Christian, it's kind of like when I have a dental cleaning. It's kind of a weird thing to say. But I know I'm not the only one with this. When I go in for a dental cleaning, like, I got to prep the week before. And I know people do this too, because I got to make sure I floss all week. I got to make sure I give it a couple of brushes, not twice a day, but 3 times a day. Because when I get there, I want them to open my mouth and be like, wow, you got clean teeth. That's stupid. Why would I clean my teeth before I go see the professionals who are going to clean my teeth? Why am I freaking out about that? Why am I trying to do it in such a way? And the same is true when it comes to people believing in Jesus. Quite often people think, well, I got to get my stuff in order so that I can look good, so that when I come to church, when I come meet Jesus, he's going to look at me and be like, oh, you know what? You're one of the good ones, and you're accepted. Come on in. You look good. And we just missed the mark. We missed the point of what it's all about. Jesus, he came and he looks at us and he's saying that even on your best day, even your biggest highlight reel ever, even the most amazing achievement you've ever done, when it comes to your salvation, when it comes to believing in Jesus, has the same value as your worst day, your worst achievement, and the lowest stooping. Well, why? Because it's not about what you do. There's nothing that we can do to earn our way to go into heaven. It's not like when we come and meet Jesus and before we're Christian, Jesus is like, oh, you're so clean. Your life is so good. You are a great person. You're in my club. man, our church is filled with broken people. People that associate, that have met Jesus, that are Christians, but are just trying to figure it out. There's no perfect people here. And if you go into a church and they say that we're a church of perfect people, leave. Because it's not true. When it comes to our faith, Jesus wants to meet us. We don't have to be perfect. In fact, we're not able to be perfect. It's because of what he's done that there's nothing we can do to earn God's grace and mercy. The problem of our world is we got this thing called sin. You've experienced it. You know, the things we do, we know we shouldn't do. You've definitely experienced it if you have kids. The things that we don't do, that we know we should do. The things in life that we know don't please God. The thing that's kind of, we put in the back room in our heart. Like when people ask us, like, hey, so how's your life going? What's going on? It's the one thing we're like, okay, don't ask me about that. Don't ask me about that. That's the sin thing. We do it every day, usually. There's all kinds of things, but through this, God's free gift of grace is the fact that despite we deserve it, if we come to him and ask for forgiveness, we're forgiven. And this is the truth, the second truth I just want you to hear today. Your past can be forgiven. It can be forgiven. And the most amazing display of this is found when Jesus was hanging on the cross in between these two thieves. Go back to this story with me. We're on the third day with Jesus rising from the dead, but let's go back a couple of days. And Jesus is hanging there on the cross, and on his left and his right are these two thieves. And one of them is cussing him out. Like, Jesus, come on, if you're the Son of God, like, save yourself, save us, let's go, what are you doing? And the other guy is hanging next to him, and he rebukes the one guy. And this guy who rebukes him, he's never been to church, we don't think. He's not been to Bible studies. He's not lived a great life, obviously, because he deserved to be on the cross. He was a thief. He was someone that deserved to be there. Jesus didn't. And he looks at Jesus after he rebukes the other thief. And this is the most amazing thing. He says to Jesus in verse 42 of Luke 23, Jesus, remember me when you come into your kingdom. What did Jesus say? He answered him, truly I tell you, today you will be with me in paradise. Your past can be forgiven. Yeah, but you don't know about, doesn't matter. Yeah, but what about, doesn't matter. Yeah, but remember when doesn't matter. Do you believe that? Your past can be forgiven. Our whole faith is based upon the fact that Jesus died for us. He rose from the dead. He overcame death so that the punishment we deserve for the sin we commit, he paid it. And the implications of that is because of that, we now can be forgiven. If we meet Jesus today, if we respond to Jesus looking at you, saying your name, saying, Calvin, I'm here. It's your teacher. If we respond to that and ask for forgiveness, say, I'm sorry for all these things I've done. I'm sorry I doubted. I'm sorry I didn't believe in you. I'm sorry the way I've lived. Please forgive me. He says, I'll see you in paradise. How amazing is that? The assurance of knowing that if we believe in Jesus, our past can be forgiven. There's a sweet moment that happens in this story. And it's in verse 16 of John 20. We're back to Jesus and Mary. And Jesus said to her, Mary. He didn't say like we heard earlier she was referred to as woman. Can you imagine if Jesus is like, he's rose from the dead, he looks at her and goes, woman! Doesn't quite have the same impact, does it? He looks at her and says, I'm personally welcoming you, loving you. I'm seeing you. A woman who is low status, who would be ignored, avoided, wouldn't be believed. Jesus looks at her and says, there's no one else here. There were some angels, they're gone now, but no one else is here. I'm looking at you. You're obediently here. You're in your grief. Your whole life has been turned upside down because I was your leader and you thought I was dead, but now I'm back. Mary. Oh, man. Surely they must have embraced, right? Like, I don't know, what would it feel like to hug Jesus? Maybe he wiped away her tears. It's a sweet moment. It's a moment where he's bringing back hope into her story. Jesus tenderly meets her, calls her by name. In her darkest hour of grief, he brings back hope into her story. Man, this is what Jesus does, right? This is what Easter is about. He meets us in our personal time of despair, and Jesus calls us by name. I don't know why you came today. I don't know if your life feels like it's in shambles, if you've been through something that's really been tough recently. Maybe you lost a loved one. Maybe your job has been crazy and you're wondering, am I going to have a job? Is it a good thing for me to do? Maybe you're looking for work. Maybe you're just lonely or overwhelmed with the stress and struggle of life. We get there, right? Doesn't matter if you believe in Jesus or not. You still have to live in this world, and it can be overwhelming. It can be tough, and yet, here's what I do know. He can bring hope back into your story. A hopeless life is not a life worth living. I truly believe that. But a hope-filled life, the hope that comes from Jesus, is a life worth living. Doubt is real, and that's okay. Sometimes we feel like, okay, I can't be real with God. Come on, he's the God of the universe. Like, he created everything. You really think he can't deal with your doubts? He wants you to share them. Ask him. He loves you. Ask him, say, God, I know you're saying this stuff, but really? Well, can you help me? I need some help with this. If you have a loving father, you know that your dad wants to help you, right? Doesn't want you to sit there struggling. That's what God wants us to do. We can bring our doubts to him. He can handle them. But the truth is, hope is available. And we use hope in an interesting way in this day and age. We say things like, we hope you have a safe flight. Can that be a certainty, please? I want it to be like any question in that safe flight. We use hope in more of an uncertain way, right? Like, oh yeah, I hope the Red Sox win the World Series. Like, exactly. Or maybe you say, one day, I hope I'll meet the love of my life. We say and use the word hope like there's this uncertainty attached to it. That's the definition of hope for us. But this isn't the same hope from Jesus because it's different. It's not something that only desires good for the future. It expects it to happen. It's an expectant hope. And not only expectant hope, but it's confident that it will happen. Our hope in Jesus is not like, I hope this is all real. I hope this story about Jesus is real so one day I can be in heaven and I don't waste my life doing all this Jesus stuff. That's not hope. That's uncertainty. Hope in Jesus is being certain that we know he rose from the dead. There's a certainty to the hope we can have in Jesus. You ever think about what happens after you die? Like the life after death. There's all these movies about it, right? And usually they're either comedies or really depressing. But our life, when we think about it, when we think about how we're living, most people, the biggest fear that they have is the looming fear of death. And last I checked, it's the death rate's at 100%. It's coming. It's happening. We know it's going to come. There's no, I hope I don't die. We're all going to die one day. Do you think about what happens after? Where are you going to go? What are we going to do? And when we think about it, I think that what would change if you were certain of where you're going to go? If you didn't have fear of death, what in your life, how you live, would change for you personally? When you experience a diagnosis that puts a definite timeline on your life, things change, right? You change how you live. You start to do things that are more important to you. You don't worry about that loose shingle on the roof. You don't worry about the things that you know aren't as important in life. You worry about impacting your grandkids, telling your wife that you love them, showing your husband how much you love him. You worry about the things that are important to you. When you know where you're going, you can really live. It changes things. It gives you this hope that is certain, this hope that is only found in Jesus. And this hope, it leads to the greatest thing ever. And that is your future can be secure. There's so many uncertainties in life, right? We put our hopes in a lot of different things. And anybody that has invested money in things like the stock market, there's some good days, and then way more bad days is what it feels like, right? Maybe your hopes in a relationship. How's that going for you? It can be. When we have our hope and future secure in Jesus, we know that at the day of judgment, we can have certainty. We can say, the guy on the middle cross, he said I can come in. When the angel asks us, we can say, we're certain because of what Jesus did. For many people, that the end of their life is scary. But for me, there's still some questions. There's still some struggles on different days with it. But I'm excited. I'm celebrating the fact that Jesus is alive. He rose from the dead, and I'm going to spend eternity with him in heaven. The author Scott Sauls says, the resurrection seals the fact that God has moved our judgment day from the future to the past. It's already happened. Jesus already won. He is risen. Doubt is real, but your past can be forgiven. Hope is available, and your future can be secure. If your hope is not in Jesus today, please know that you can make that decision. He's saying your name right now. He's looking at you. And he's offering you this personal relationship where you can come and embrace Jesus and say, he is my Savior, he is my Lord, I'm going to live for him no matter who you are, no matter what you've done, or even what's been done to you. You can be forgiven. You just have to respond.